Lily Carter moved quickly through the tall glass doors of Silverstone Enterprises. Her heels clicked across the polished floor as people stepped aside and nodded. Everyone in the building knew her. She was the woman who built the company from the ground up and never let emotions slow her down. Her dark hair was tied neatly, her eyes calm and sharp, her suit perfectly pressed. Every inch of her looked like power under control. That morning was like any other. She stopped by her assistant's desk, took her schedule, and was about to walk toward the elevator when she heard a small sound in the distance. At first it blended with the noise of phones ringing and footsteps crossing the tile floors. Then the sound came again, soft and clear. Mommy Lily froze. She turned slowly toward the voice. In the middle of the busy lobby stood a tiny girl, no older than 4. The girl had curly brown hair and wore a sky-blue dress covered in little white daisies. In her small hands, she held a stuffed bunny with one ear flopped down. Her eyes were bright and full of trust as she looked straight at Lily. Before anyone could speak, the little girl ran across the floor. Her small shoes tapped quickly against the tiles. The receptionist gasped. The guards exchanged confused looks. Lily, who always had full control of every meeting, every deal, every smile she allowed to show, did not know what to do. The child stopped right in front of her and stretched out tiny arms. "Mommy, you came back!" Lily's breath caught. The world around her seemed to fade. For one strange moment, all the noise of the office turned into silence. She looked down at the child, lost for words. "I am sorry, miss," said a woman rushing toward them. Was in her early 40s, wearing a simple coat and holding a bag full of children's books. "Hope, sweetheart, this lady isn't who you think she is." The child blinked and looked up at Lily again. A hint of confusion appeared in her small face. But when Lily knelt down, something passed between them. It was a quiet feeling, something gentle yet heavy, like a memory that refused to stay hidden. "It's all right," Lily said softly, though she herself did not know why her heart hurt all of a sudden. "She's just a little mistaken." The woman nodded quickly. "I am terribly sorry, Miss Carter. Hope lost her mother not long ago. Sometimes she imagines her in strangers. Please forgive her." Lily smiled faintly, but her chest tightened. She wanted to say it was fine, that everything was fine, but the words would not come easily. She looked at the girl again. Hope held her bunny close and stared back with eyes that looked far too knowing for her age. At the other side of the lobby, Ethan Brooks had just walked in. He was tall, with calm eyes that often seemed to read people easily. As the new investor who had joined the company only a week ago, he had heard of Lily Carter's fame, but had never met her face to face. Watching her now, standing there with a small child calling her mommy, surprised him more than any business rumor could. He stopped near the security desk and watched. There was something about the scene that did not fit the powerful CEO. It's the lost little girl, the embarrassed nanny, and yet it all seemed strangely connected. The nanny, still apologizing, picked Hope up and turned to leave. The child buried her face in the woman's shoulder, but peeked one last time at Lily. Lily found herself, unable to look away until the elevator doors closed. When silence returned, Lily walked briskly toward her private lift. Her employees moved out of the way. She didn't notice the whispers behind her or the puzzled faces. All she noticed was a strange ache deep inside her. In her office, high above the city, she sat behind her large desk. Through the tall windows, skyscrapers gleamed like silver blades. She told herself it was silly to think about what had happened. A child had mistaken her for someone else. That was all. But when she closed her eyes for a second, she saw Hope's eyes again, and the way the girl had smiled with complete certainty. She tried to push the thought away, yet it returned like a stubborn echo. Her assistant knocked on the door and walked in with files. Lily nodded and signed them one by one, forcing herself back into the flow of numbers and contracts, but her hand trembled when she reached for her pen. Ethan Brooks visited her office later that day for a meeting. He noticed the coolness in her voice and the faint trace of something he could not name in her eyes. As she spoke about quarterly plans and rising profits, Ethan studied her carefully. There was strength in her posture, but behind that strength, he saw something else, a shadow of loss. For reasons he could not explain, he wanted to know more about her than any business report could tell. And somewhere far below in the city, Hope looked up from her toy and asked her nanny when they could see the nice lady again. Neither Lily nor Ethan could guess it yet, but that small moment in the lobby had just begun to pull invisible strings between their hearts, strings that neither time nor reason could ever fully undo. The next morning, the sky above the city was pale and quiet. Lily Carter stood by her window watching the streets below. Cars moved like silver insects, and people hurried to work. On the surface, everything looked the same, but inside her mind, everything had changed. The sound of that small girl's voice still played again and again in her head. She told herself it was foolish to think about it. The little girl had simply mistaken her for someone else. Still, something deep within her refused to let the matter rest. When she closed her eyes, she could almost see the girl's small face and those wide, trusting eyes. Lily tried to focus on her work. Meetings filled her day. She signed reports and spoke with managers. No one who looked at her would guess that her calm mask was beginning to crack. Every few hours, she caught herself touching her own heart as if to quiet it. By afternoon, Ethan Brooks arrived for a meeting about the new investment plan, found Lily at her desk surrounded by papers. She greeted him politely, but her tone was faintly distant. They began to discuss figures and projects, yet Ethan noticed that she seemed distracted. After the meeting, he hesitated at the door before leaving and finally said quietly that she looked tired. She smiled and replied that she was just fine, but he knew it was not true. Later that evening, Ethan met one of his friends for dinner and mentioned what he had seen in the lobby the day before. His friend had no idea what he was talking about, but the curiosity had already taken root in Ethan's mind. Something did not add up. No, the controlled and fearless CEO had looked almost fragile when that small girl clung to her. It was not just surprise, it was something deeper. Ethan was not a man who liked gossip. Yet that night he opened his laptop and began to read through old public articles about Lily Carter. Her life before she became the head of Silverstone was almost empty of detail. It was as if she had simply appeared one day with a new name and a business plan. Before that, there was a gap of several years that was never explained. The next day at the company, he crossed paths with the nanny by chance near the parking area. She was helping the small girl named Hope into a car seat. Ethan greeted them kindly. Hope smiled at him and waved. After a moment of small talk, Ethan asked the nanny a simple question about how long she had taken care of the child. The woman answered that she had been with Hope since she was a baby. Her mother had died in a car accident 5 years earlier, and no one really knew much detail about it. Ethan felt a spark of connection leap in his thoughts. 5 years earlier, that was about the same time the records of Lily's life grew hazy. He thanked the nanny politely and walked away, but his mind would not rest. That evening, he communicated with a private contact who worked in data research. Within a day, the man sent him copies of news from 5 years ago. One short notice spoke of a woman named Laura Bennett missing after a car crash outside Chicago. She had been on her way to visit her newborn daughter at the hospital. Her car had gone off the road in heavy rain and burned. No body had been confirmed, though a woman in a coma had been listed unnamed in an emergency clinic miles away. Ethan read the note again and again. The dates fit. The missing woman's age fit. Even the partial description matched Lily's features. He tried to tell himself that coincidences often happened, but the feeling in his chest said otherwise. Back in her apartment that same night, Lily ran a bath and tried to relax. Yet in the quiet, she began to hear faint whispers of memories she could not place. Flashes of white lights. The feeling of cold rain on her skin. A baby's cry that faded into silence. She held her head in her hands and wondered if her imagination was playing cruel tricks again. When she went to bed, she dreamed of walking through fog toward a small child who kept calling her name. Each time she reached out, the child vanished. She woke up with tears on her face and could not understand why. Ethan spent that night at his desk looking over the gathered files. When he saw Lily the next morning, she looked pale. He wanted to ask if she was all right, but could not find the right words. Instead, they spoke of finance plans as usual, though. Both felt the air between them charged with unspoken truth. That afternoon, Hope and her nanny visited the building again. Hope saw Lily from across the hall, and her small face lit up. She waved and smiled. Lily felt a strange warmth rise in her chest, but also a deep ache she could not name. She reached out a hand and greeted the child. Hope laughed and said she had missed her. Standing a little behind them, Ethan watched the moment quietly. The same quiet pull tightened inside him again. It was more than a child's misunderstanding. There was a connection none of them yet understood. And as he watched Lily bend down to speak gently to the little girl, he promised himself that he would find out who Lily truly was and why that child's voice felt like a key turning inside her heart. Days passed, but the feeling inside Lily would not leave. She worked longer hours hoping to fill her mind with numbers and decisions. Yet when the office grew quiet at night, she found herself thinking about the child named Hope. Each time she pictured those brown eyes, a mix of fear and softness came over her. She wondered why a simple meeting with a stranger's child could shake her so deeply. Ethan noticed the change in her more and more. Her smile had become rare, and her eyes were often far away. He tried to tell himself that what he had found in his search should remain in his folder. Still, every time he looked at her, he felt guilt holding the secret to himself. One morning, Lily received a request from Ethan about a proposal for a charity program. It was about raising funds for families who had lost loved ones in road accidents. The topic made her pause, yet she agreed to help. She told herself that it was the right thing to do for the company, but somewhere inside she knew it was more personal. They began to meet in the evenings to plan the details. Their meetings were quiet and often stretched longer than they meant to. As they worked side by side, Ethan saw a softer side of Lily. She laughed at small mistakes and listened closely when he talked about his own family who lived far away. He saw the walls around her gently lower piece by piece. One night after everyone had left the building, they stayed behind finishing a speech for the event. Papers were scattered across the table, and the sound of the city hummed faintly outside. When Lily looked up from her notes, she found Ethan watching her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she said in a quiet voice that she did not like to drive in heavy rain. He asked why, and she hesitated before answering. She told him she had been in an accident years ago. She had no memory of what happened before waking up in a hospital. The doctor said she was lucky to be alive, but the past before that night was mostly gone. Her name had been changed afterward because she wanted to start over. A stranger had sponsored her treatment and given her a chance to begin again under the name Lily Carter. As she spoke, Ethan listened with a heavy heart. The puzzle pieces he had found now formed a clear picture. She was Laura Bennett, the woman who had been lost after the crash, the woman whose baby had been left behind. Ethan felt his chest tighten with disbelief and sorrow. He asked softly if she had ever tried to find her past. Lily shook her head. She said that sometimes she felt pieces of it trying to rise, but they never became clear. She often dreamed of a crying child, though she did not know why. She admitted that sounds of small children could make her uneasy, but she did not understand the reason. Ethan leaned back in his chair, trying to keep his voice calm. He told her that maybe the memories were not gone, but waiting for the right moment to return. Lily smiled sadly and changed the subject back to the charity plan. When the night grew late, they left the building together. Outside, the air was warm and smelled of the sea. They walked a short distance down the street. Lily thanked him for helping her and said the event meant more to her than she expected. Ethan looked at her and said he was glad to be part of it. For a moment, he almost told her everything right then, but something held him back. He wanted to be sure before he took away the only piece she had. Over the next few days, the charity event drew closer. Posters were made and invitations sent. Lily threw herself into the work with new energy. She seemed lighter when she visited the children's center where the event would take place. Hope was there again with her nanny and ran toward Lily with joy. This time, Lily did not stop her. She smiled and picked the little girl up. The child rested her head on Lily's shoulder, and it felt strangely natural, as if she had done it many times before. Ethan stood nearby watching them. He felt torn between hope and fear. The truth waited in his folder at home. One paper, one name, one photo could change everything. Yet part of him wanted to believe that fate itself would show her when the time was right. That night, Lily could not sleep. The scent of Hope's hair, the touch of her small hands lingered in her memory. She sat by the window and whispered to the silent stars that she wished she knew why her heart hurt in such a sweet and painful way. Ethan, too, lay awake thinking of her. He understood that their lives were now tied together in ways neither of them could yet see. He knew that soon the truth would have to come out. Till then, he would stay close to her side, guiding her toward the pieces of herself she did not yet remember. The morning of the charity gala came with bright sunlight across the city. Silverstone Hall had been decorated with soft white lights and banners showing hope and renewal. Guests in neat clothes walked through the glass doors as music played gently in the background. Lily stood near the entrance, greeting people with a calm smile that hid her nervous heart. It had been weeks since she started planning this event with Ethan. She had not known why it made her feel so emotional until now. Every moment reminded her of something she could not clearly remember. Ethan arrived just before the speeches began. He looked sharp in a dark suit, but his eyes were filled with quiet worry. The papers hidden in his briefcase carried the truth about Lily's past and about Hope. He had not yet found the courage to give them to her. He was afraid of what the knowledge would do to her heart. Still, he knew the time for silence was ending. The event began with warm applause. Guests listened to stories of families rebuilt after loss, of small children given new homes, of courage after tragedy. When Lily took the stage to speak, she looked around the crowd and saw Hope sitting beside her nanny in the front row. The little girl waved shyly. Lily smiled back before turning to the microphone. Her voice was calm as she thanked everyone for coming and spoke of how love could heal even broken hearts. But as she continued, her words began to tremble. She said that sometimes people forget parts of themselves after pain, yet somehow life finds ways to return what is missing. The audience thought she spoke in general, but Ethan, standing to one side, knew that every word came from deep inside her. Her eyes glistened, though she kept her composure until the end. When she stepped off the stage, the crowd cheered softly. Later, as guests talked and children played near the stage, Hope climbed onto a stool by the piano placed at one corner of the hall. Her nanny tried to stop her, but Lily smiled and said to let her play if she wanted to. Hope placed her tiny fingers on the keys and began to play a simple tune. The melody floated through the room, light and tender, and everyone turned to listen. The sound struck something inside Lily like a bell. Her vision blurred for a second. She knew that tune. She did not remember learning it, yet each note felt like a piece of her own heart. She walked slowly toward Hope as flashes of memory rushed through her head. She saw herself holding a baby in a hospital bed. She saw rain covering a highway and bright light from a crash. She heard crying fading away into silence. Her body shook as she reached the piano. Hope looked up and smiled, still pressing the keys. Lily's knees weakened and she covered her mouth. Ethan saw her falter and hurried forward. When he reached her, tears were already forming in her eyes. She looked at him in confusion and whispered that she remembered the tune. She asked where she had heard it before. Ethan knew then that there was no point in hiding any longer. He led her away from the crowd to a quiet corner behind the curtains. With gentle hands, he opened his briefcase and pulled out a photo. The picture showed a young woman with the same eyes as Lily and a baby wrapped in a pink blanket. Across the bottom of the picture was written the name Laura Bennett and the date from 5 years ago. Beneath it was another document, the hospital record marked as missing. Lily stared at the picture in silence. Her breath came quick and uneven. She whispered the name as if tasting it. The name unlocked the rest of the memories. She remembered the drive through rain to see her baby. She remembered the crash and the pain. She remembered trying to reach the blanket before darkness closed in. Then everything went blank until she had woken up in a strange room with no memory of who she was. Tears streamed down her face as she dropped to her knees. She looked at Ethan through her tears and said that the little girl was hers. Ethan nodded and said softly that Hope had never stopped waiting. The sound of footsteps came near. Hope had wandered searching for Lily and now stood at the edge of the curtain, holding her bunny. She saw Lily crying and ran to her arms. Lily held her tightly, burying her face in her daughter's hair. For the first time in years, her heart felt whole. The crowd began to notice something happening, but Ethan shielded the moment from their view. He watched as mother and child clung together. The sight filled him with both sorrow and peace. The secret he had carried was now laid bare, but it had returned something sacred to the woman he loved. When Lily finally stood, she thanked him through her tears. For the first time in her life, the world felt clear. She would no longer live as someone she was not. She was Lily Carter and Laura Bennett, both mother and survivor. Hope clung to her hand as they stepped back into the bright hall together. Ethan followed close behind, knowing their lives had changed forever. The truth had broken the silence of the past and mended the bond that fate had once stolen away. The sun rose slowly over the quiet city the day after the charity event. Lily stood in front of the window of her apartment, holding a cup of coffee that had already grown cold. Hope was sleeping in the next room, tired from the long night before. The memory of holding her daughter again still felt unreal. She kept touching her hand as if to make sure she was really there. Her heart felt heavy and light at the same time. It's heavy for all the years that were lost, and light because the emptiness inside her had finally found its missing piece. She had thought her strength came from control and work, but now she understood that it had come from love all along. Ethan came by that morning. He knocked softly and waited. When Lily opened the door, he saw her face pale from crying, yet her eyes held a calm glow he had never seen before. She thanked him for telling her the truth. He said he was sorry that he had waited so long. She shook her head and told him that he had given her a life back, and that was something no one else could have done. They sat together at the kitchen table. The morning light fell across the photo album that Ethan had brought. Inside were copies of pictures from the missing file. There was one of the hospital stay, and another of a bright nursery room painted in soft colors. Lily traced the edge of each picture with trembling fingers. She said that she wanted to tell Hope everything when she was ready, but for now she only wanted to give her daughter safety and joy. Ethan told her that he would help her find the rest of the story if she wished. For some time neither spoke. They only listened to the ticking clock and the distant sound of cars below. An easy silence grew between them. It was not the tense silence of secrets, but the warm kind that belongs to people who have already told each other the most important truths. Later that afternoon, Lily took Hope to a park near the sea. The wind moved softly through the trees, and the air smelled of salt. Shh. Hope ran toward the swings laughing, and the sound wrapped around Lily like music. She pushed her gently and watched her small legs kick at the air. Each laugh felt like light filling the dark corners of her memory. Ethan joined them and sat on a bench nearby. He watched Lily with a look that mixed admiration and care. When Hope ran off to chase pigeons, he stood beside Lily. She looked up at him and asked if he ever thought life could bring people back from the edges where they were lost. He said sometimes the heart knows the way, even when the mind has forgotten. They began to meet often after that day. Sometimes it was for business, and other times just to walk or talk about nothing in particular. Lily was learning to balance her life again. She still led the company, but she also spent evenings reading stories to Hope or cooking simple meals that filled the little home with laughter. The city outside did not look different, but to her, every building and street seemed brighter. Weeks turned into months, and the three of them grew close. People at Silverstone started to notice the change in their CEO. She smiled at staff more often. Her voice held warmth, and her eyes no longer looked lost. Some said it was because of success. Others whispered that she had finally learned what happiness truly was. One evening, Lily returned to the coast where the accident had once happened. The road had been repaired, and a small wooden railing kept cars safe from the edge. She stood there with Ethan and Hope beside her. The sky burned orange as the sun began to set. She closed her eyes and whispered a quiet farewell to the past. She thanked the world for giving her another chance and for guiding her back to her child. As the wind blew across their faces, Ethan took her hand. She let him and did not pull away. Hope slipped her tiny fingers into Lily's other hand, and the three of them stood together watching the horizon. It was not a family built by chance, but one rebuilt by faith and love. When they drove away from the shore, Lily looked through the mirror and saw Hope asleep in the back seat. He said the drive back might take time, and she answered that she did not mind. For the first time, she was in no hurry. Life had once taken everything from her, but it had also brought her to this moment. As the city lights appeared in the distance, Lily rested her head back and let out a breath that felt like a promise. She finally understood that fate had not tried to break her. It had only tried to show her the strength she carried inside. The story that began in pain had ended in peace. And in the gentle rhythm of the tires on the road and the heartbeat she felt when she looked at Ethan, she knew that love had found its way home at last.